Okay. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. For those who don't know me, I am Sarah Gittleson. I'm the co-director of Spark. And what Spark does, we're located in Orlando. Our goal is to inspire, connect, and promote Jewish values. And one of the most important Jewish values is taking care of our bodies, preservation of life. And today what we're talking about is really, matters of life and death, which is, such an important Jewish value. And the truth is, I wish we weren't having this conversation. I wish there wasn't a need for this conversation, but unfortunately it is so relevant. I want to thank our panelists today, Michal, Osteen, and Yachnes, for taking time out to speak about this important topic. Just to give you a little overview of what to expect, Michal is going to start and share with us her story. We're then going to have a discussion regarding prevention, awareness, and treatment, and we're going to end off with some time for a Q&A. Michal Osteen lives in Orlando, Florida. She grew up in Israel and is a licensed mental health therapist. She had 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Yachnes, I know, is a licensed clinical social worker and has spent the last 20 years working with individuals and their families struggling with abuse and addiction in both inpatient and outpatient settings. He is the founder and director of Onward Living, a Jewish treatment facility based in Boca Raton, Florida, and also the CEO of Onward Living, Archstone Behavioral Health, a full continuum of care rehab program in Palm Beach County. He lives with his wife, Ahuva, and his 4 children in Boca. So thank you both for joining us today. Thank you everyone who has come to this program. The response has been very overwhelming, I think, which says a lot about Michal, how many people love and care about you, and also how relevant this issue is. Now, Michal, I never met Ari, your son, but I've been very inspired by all the stories I've heard about him. And, today we're here to talk about addiction, but really he's so much more than just his issue with addiction. So I would love for you to talk a bit about Ari, share a little bit about Ari, and also tell us about his story.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for being here. And a lot of people tell me how brave I am. First of all, if I do start to cry, please forgive me. I will try very hard to hold my emotions in right now. I'm not brave at all. We fall apart 100 times a day, if not more. Every little thing reminds us of Ari, everything we do. We want him to be with us. My other 2 kids are suffering, and as a mother, it's really hard to watch them suffer. But to go through what we're going through, this and unfathomable grief, and the love we had for Ari and what he went through, just motivates me to speak, so no other family or other teen or young people and old have to go through this. During the Shiva, so many people whispered in my ear and said, can you call us when you're done with your grief? Because we're going through this with our son, with our nephew, with our daughter. So I felt it's really important to start talking about this, about the shame that families go through, about the guilt that the addict goes through, and how the addict feels so overwhelmed by what his mind is doing to him. Mine is only one story of thousands. And Ari already started to speak to youth groups and parents groups, so I feel I will do this for him. And I will continue to do this. Ari, as a child, was always extremely sensitive and he did have some anxiety issues because of his sensitivity. He was a very happy child, a very happy teenager. He was the kindest human being that I ever met. In high school, he started a group called Stand for Darfur, and he got so many people involved in donating a lot of money to Darfur. In Israel, he volunteered with the refugees from Sudan. He started small businesses for them in Israel so they can have a life. Ari became an EMT after he was in high tech, because he wanted to work with people and not with computers. And he saved a lot of lives. And every day I'm getting phone calls from people that he saved his lives that are finding out that he's gone. And not do they feel guilty, they're looking. And I always tell them, just please, he saved you for a reason. Take him with you, show him your strength, and do not fall back into addiction. Ari would see someone on the street sitting alone, homeless. He would just sit next to them and listen to their story. Sometimes he would hold their hands, sometimes he would bring them food. As an EMT, he saved a lot of lives. One particular story is that he saved an old woman, and she was from South Africa, and she had no one in the United States. He would visit her every week and would sit for 2 hours just listening to her story, would bring her challah for Shabbat and just be there for her. They became extremely close, and she's also devastated by his loss. Ari, the story for Ari is that he in college played volleyball for UF and got his back injured. He was put in the hospital and they gave him oxycodone. When they sent him home, he was given over 30 oxycodone pills, which at that time, oxy was given unknown to be addictive. So there are thousands of people in this country that are addicted to opiates because of the oxycodone issue, and it's definitely a huge epidemic. Ari went to rehab to get help. He graduated in honors with degrees. He started a new life. He was doing great. And then through his EMT, he got re-injured a few months ago, maybe half a year ago or more even. And that he went to the hospital, begged not to get oxy, but the pain was so much that they had to give him some oxy, and that started another whole spiral down in his life. He fought the addiction every day. And the DEA explained this to me. I know way too much about addictions and every kind of addiction, because Ari went to rehab 3 times to try and help himself. 90%, I'm told by rehab centers, and Mo can speak to this, 90% of people get clean and relapse. So after this time, and he went to rehab in LA, it's called Bet Teshuva, and he was there for 9 months. He did really well. He got a job, he lived on his own, he was working, he was doing great. During COVID, he came home because he was coming here for a wedding, and he was also having a difficult time. And he was living here thinking, oh, I'll get a job and everything will be okay, I'll be back. But during COVID, there were no programs for him to go, no 12-step face-to-face meetings, and no support. So he was clean, but extremely depressed. And as time went on, he couldn't meet friends, he wouldn't be with friends. And the few friends he had still off and on smoked marijuana or drank, and Ari was not able to do that. He didn't have a support system. So he didn't want to be a burden to his friends, so he wouldn't go to and get together with them because he didn't want them not to be able to drink or smoke marijuana. So as loneliness progressed, we were testing him every day because we were fearful. And the last 2 weeks before the tragedy happened, he was totally clean. On Sunday, he decided to go out, and let me explain what this thing. Every day he said to me, "Mom, the drugs hijacked my brain. They hijacked my brain. I'm fighting this every moment in my life, every moment. And I want to live. I have so much more to do. I want to live. I'm going to make it." But the DA explained to me afterwards, which I never knew just how hijacked the brain is. And this was something that made it clear to me, and I want parents to understand what addiction is. And he said, it's like holding your head underwater. Someone's holding your head underwater 10 minutes or 2, 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden they let you go and you take that breath. And that's what the drug does to you. Your brain wants it so badly. So on Sunday, Ari went out and wanted to calm his brain, apparently. He wasn't looking for what he was given, but he also didn't know the area. So he ended up he came home, and he apparently, the last thing he said to me was, hold on. He said, "Good night, Mom. I love you. I'll see you in the morning, and we'll make the fruit shake together as we did every morning." And he took the drug, and it was fentanyl that was laced 6 times strong of fentanyl. It was pure poison. The coroner told us that he took a tiny little puff and he was gone. So he didn't come down in the morning, and we lost him. I want to just give you some statistics that since 2000, close to 600,000 people have died from overdose because of the opiate crisis. A lot more, the statistics is a lot higher if you include everything else. People ask me if marijuana can overdose. Can you get overdose on marijuana? The answer is most likely not, but one can get addicted. 1 out of 10 people get addicted, and 1 out of 6 teens can get addicted. Marijuana signs are often depression, confusion, anxiety, and panic. And those can lead to further use of other things, not to mention peer pressure today. Since COVID, the numbers have risen so much because so many people don't have a place to go to. Ari, the week before he passed, he called the rehab center, and he wanted to go back. He spoke to the rabbi, Bet Shuvah is run by a rabbi, and although they take non-Jewish people as well. And the rabbi told him, "I want to have you back here so much, but all our beds are filled, all the rooms are filled, program is totally overfilled, and so many people are calling us for help because they're all relapsing because of COVID and the loneliness and no support. So this is really my story. I know that there are a lot of suicides going on, a lot of kids with depressions that might be looking to marijuana. Ari told me before that no matter what I did, I couldn't save him. He had to save himself. But I think parents can do is try to prevent this, try to see the first signs. We didn't see the first signs because he was in college. But there are so many signs which Mo and I will speak to about later. But even today, marijuana, and Mo, correct me if I'm wrong, can be laced with fentanyl. The DA told me that it's even hard to find heroin today because everything is laced with fentanyl because it's so much cheaper than, and I do know that the guy that killed my son is in prison and he's charged with murder with no way out because Ari didn't have anything else in his system except this. So they will be able to put him for life. But there's so many other ones that are out there and the DA has incredibly hard time proving death. So I will turn over to Mo.
Thank you.
And at the end, I'll try and explain or help with some signs to look for with your kids.
Thank you, Michal. I know you said you're not brave, but I would beg to differ. You know, even though you're very much grieving, and this is so recent, I really appreciate you willing to share your story with all of us.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Mo. I'd like to hear, you know, what you're seeing these days in terms of addiction.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me on, and thank you for all the work the organization is doing. And Michal, to you and to your family, your courage is admirable and it's inspiring to all of us that are around the table here today. And voices like yours will help me go out of business, essentially. And that's what we're hoping for, because we're really, you know, it takes a village to help the individual struggling. And the more people that come forward and share their story and are courageous enough to shed some light into the very complex world will help spread the word, essentially, and help with families and individuals beat this thing, you know, going forward. So thank you for your courage, and thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
For your words and facilitating this. So, you know, as far as some of what we're seeing today, you know, when people think about drugs and alcohol, there's a certain visualization that comes to mind, and it's been that way for a long time, where you think about this homeless person or from a certain socioeconomic background, under a bridge, you know, homeless. And I think that, you know, over the last really 20 years, since the advancement, so to speak, of painkillers and the pharmaceutical push to get these painkillers, lethal painkillers, out to the global medical community has really shifted the dynamics of addiction, of drug use, and people that aren't necessarily, don't necessarily have the template to fall into addiction are falling into addiction. And that's something that we're seeing a huge trend more recently. The numbers are astronomical. It is a, you know, we talk about the opiate epidemic. We talk about fentanyl as being the killer. You know, what I'd like to share is really some of the things that we're seeing in our community, some of the things that we're seeing with people like you and I, with family systems, with, you know, sending our kids to private schools, having some normalcy when it comes to jobs. And yet the kids that we're seeing and the adults, young adults, are falling into addiction. There are, I would say, three major contributing factors to that. on a macro level. Number one is, what I think, Michal, what you outlined is this huge push for prescription drugs, where drugs and alcohol has been legalized, right? Where the accessibility is so much more available. You do not need to be in a bad neighborhood. You do not need to be associated with people who are struggling for decades. You can literally be in your living room on the couch watching TV and have drugs delivered to your doorstep. So the trends are really shifting to the accessibility of these toxic drugs. The second is obviously the world has gotten closer with internet, social media, again, allowing a pathway to drugs being delivered, being more accessible. And the third is what we're seeing a lot of people struggling that have not been diagnosed or have not had the opportunity to share some kind of inner darkness, some kind of struggle that lays dormant for years. And when they find this drug or this experience, it opens up a light for them. And if we can, capture that darkness a little bit earlier on, it will help change really the direction of a person falling prey to the accessibility and to the availability of drugs. So those are the three kind of pillars that we're seeing shifting the trends to opiate use and really drugs across the board. The other piece is the fentanyl piece, which is a huge contributing factor, where we're seeing tons of accidental overdose, where young people and adults are looking to escape, they're looking to numb, and by accident they fall into getting exposed to drugs that are so much more potent than they're used to, that their bodies can handle. And that's another huge contributing factor in seeing kind of the recent trends. So that's kind of overarching I wanted to start with. We're seeing, an increase over the last year. We saw from 21 to 29% increase in opiate overdose associated with fentanyl. And you take those numbers compared to even 5 years ago, it's a whole different playing field. So it's important for people to realize that the tendency and the rapid decline can happen in 3 to 6 months because of the availability, because of the potency, and because of this loneliness factor that is existent throughout.
Are you seeing anybody, any clients that are coming in because their marijuana was laced?
Yeah, we're seeing trends in what's called drug-induced psychosis, where almost an innocent pot-smoking person falls into real psychiatric presentation because they're experiencing psych breaks, they're experiencing a lot of what you see from a patient who struggles with significant personality disorder, bipolar tendencies. There's a lot of the psychosis symptomology that's showing up because the marijuana is laced with synthetic materials. And that obviously, again, talks to that rapid decline in such a quick way.
Ari was telling me that you don't even have to leave your house. You can get it on the internet delivered to you.
Correct.
On Craigslist.
Last year alone, we went from this is again national study by SAMHSA, which is a government body that collects data. So on a national level, we saw just last year 6.7% increase to 58% for cannabis-induced psychosis. So think about what's going on, with all the legalization of marijuana and the accessibility of marijuana. We saw such a rapid increase of cannabis-induced psychosis, 6.7% last year to the end of, from 2018 to 2019 to 58%. Huge numbers.
It's really scary.
It is scary.
The next thing I want to address, and I think it would be helpful if you can both address this, Michal, from your personal perspective and Mo from your professional perspective, what are the warning signs that someone might be using?
Go ahead, Mo, you start.
Okay, so the way I say it and the way we talk to our clients and families about this is addiction at its core is the disease of escape. It's very little to do with the drug or the behavior. When you think about drugs, you think about opiates, you think about alcohol, you think about gambling, compulsive sexual behaviors, gaming, right? Those are all manifestations of a person attempting to reach to numb themselves from a certain perspective. Really, it's the flawed solution. They're dealing with a struggle and they're running away from it and they're numbing themselves. So an early sign, and one of the things that we like to share with families is, to try to explore with your loved ones, are they missing something? Is there something lacking? Whether it's physiological challenges, whether it's emotional challenges, whether it's peer-to-peer social emotional challenges, those are the things, those are clear indicators that a person is experiencing a deeper loneliness, if you will, and they're looking to escape their reality. And the sad thing about it is that when a person's high, right, when they're numb, they don't feel. So it is the solution to that pain. And what happens is a person like you outlined, Michal, it's that breath of water. A person continuously goes and chases that breath and then builds a certain dependency. As their tolerance builds, the dependency builds, and then they can't survive without the drug or that numbing mechanism. So an early sign and a consistent sign that I've seen is loneliness. How that expresses itself is different for every individual. And maybe towards the end of the program, we'll talk a little bit about what COVID has done to exacerbate that loneliness and some practical solutions around that. But what I would say is the most consistent theme that I've seen in 20 years of working with people is they feel alone, they feel isolated, they have an inability to build and to nurture a real intimacy with others. And when that happens on a continuum, they look for ways to escape and they find it.
Thank you.
Okay. Ari's problem was not that, because he comes from a very loving community. I'd say it takes a village to raise a child, and I think Orlando gave him that. He had wonderful friends. He had a girlfriend. He was extremely bright, easy, college. His started with pain, physical pain, but later on it became isolating once he started taking the drugs. So I would speak to the parents. I totally agree with what you're saying, because I'm sure have met many addicts who have gone to many parents groups and family groups. But for young kids, if your child is overly sensitive, has anxiety, if you see him, those are signs that your child might be looking for something to help them cope with either the anxiety or the depression, or certainly now loneliness. Some things to look for is the pupils of your children's eyes. Are they different from where they are? Is your child spending a lot of time alone in his room? Is your child constantly on social media and doesn't want to go out with friends? Or does your child come back from friends, maybe a little bit slurring his words, maybe running straight up to his room? Any change of behavior is a red flag. And I would caution you not to believe your teens, because once they're taking, they will lie through their teeth to protect that feeling in their brain. And they're the best liars that you can ever imagine. And they do not want to be found. They're sometimes shame, and sometimes they really like where they're at, because now They have quieted that feeling inside, either their emotional, physical pain, being scared, being afraid to go out into a group of peers because everybody else is doing it and I'm the only one that's not drinking or not smoking, then you feel as an outsider. And Ari often felt as an outsider, even in college, because he hated social media. He wanted face-to-face interaction, and his friends would say, you know, no, let's play a game on the computer. Let's do things on social media. Even he would say to me, you know, Mom, I would call friends and say, let's go and do something together. And they would say, well, let's text about it later. The loss of communication and face-to-face today with young people is very scary to me. I know my son suffered from it. He really wanted human connection. He wanted the human touch. That was very difficult for him in college. All the drinking that goes on in college. API is known for their huge drinking and marijuana use. So I would say those things, if your child either isolates himself or spends too much time with his friends and not enough with the family, those are also signs. But try to talk to your kids often and don't always believe them. And you might want to get a test. If you have any inkling that your kid is doing something wrong, don't be afraid to test them. They will agree to be tested if they're clean. They will not agree to be tested if they're not clean. They will give you every reason in the book why they shouldn't, why you should trust them, why you shouldn't be testing them. So I would highly, highly recommend get a kit, have it home, and if you suspect anything, go ahead. My grandson is after something.
Just to back on Michal and what you're saying, the two components of, you know, we know our kids, you know, when a child is born, you learn their personality and you're able to pretty much, you know, understand who they are and what their chemistry looks like after years and years. And what happens is if you're seeing any significant rapid change, that's an indicator. And very often, young adults, teenagers for sure, young adults, they don't have the language to express themselves. They talk through behaviors. So if you're seeing any significant change, I would use that as an opportunity to reflect that change back to them and create a dialogue with them around what's going on, open-ended questioning. I never met somebody struggling with addiction that didn't want the help. They just, sometimes they don't have the language to ask for it. And they do certain things, antisocial behaviors, isolation, everything you just outlined is the addict's way of telling you that they're struggling. So as opposed to confronting the behavior, although there's room for that, and we'll talk about that, it's really trying to identify that underneath the behavior is a message that's trying to come across. And if you could almost circumvent the behavior and get straight to the message, that might be an avenue of dialogue around what's really going on.
So, you know,
I just want to say one quick thing to that is that I agree 100%. Addicts do want help, but they're so scared. They're so terrified. Detox is very, very difficult, very expensive. My son had so much guilt about the money we spent on him. And I would say to him, honey, I will sell this house. What is this house going to be without you in it? And he would still say, Mom, I'm such a burden. Mom, I'm such a burden. And to watch him detox himself because he didn't want us to spend any more money was horrible. Detox is not covered by insurance most of the time. But what I wanted to say, the first time we caught him, he did not want to go to rehab. He refused to go to rehab. so I did all the background work. I found a place. I wish I'd known you then, Mo. And then we actually told him we're going on a trip, and I put him in the car and we drove down there, and he was so angry, like, why, you know, I'm not, total denial. I'm not addicted to this thing. And all he wanted is that thing to quiet his mind. He was terrified of being detoxed. He was terrified of going to rehab. Thankfully, after the initial interview there, they calmed him down. They told him how they will help him. And he was so thankful, and he agreed to stay, and he did wonderfully. And we all went as a family for 5 days there to work together. And he was so loved and always, always so supported by us as a family, his siblings. Many siblings move away. They don't want anything to do with the addict. And again, that is the shame that we're putting on in society. Oh, you have an addicted brother, or you have a mom that's addicted. We have to do something about the shame that kids will be okay to go and say, we need help. We need help before it's too late.
Thank you, Michal. Mo, you know, Michal touched on this a bit, but I'd love to hear from your perspective. You know, we talked about the warning signs. So, you know, if you do see the warning signs and you do suspect a problem, what would you suggest, you know, the loved ones do at that point?
Yeah. Well, that's an excellent question. You know, the way a clear way to conceptualize it is that there's really three levels of intervention, if you will, right? Again, once there is a thought or a concern around a person's child struggling with addiction, or the individual themselves struggling, or a spouse struggling, once there's been an identification of that issue, the first step is really reaching out to a professional, because the professional will help hold your hand and walk you through that process. It's not about isolating the individual. It's really about building a team around that individual, comprised of family, comprised of the professional, comprised of friends, because the entire system is working together. We see the optimal success when that does take place. The three levels really is initial outpatient, you know, to get a full diagnosis, if you will. You know, there's multiple levels of drug use, right? There's experimentation. That doesn't mean that a person's struggling with addiction. They're just experimenting, right? Not that I'm advocating for it, but experimentation is not addiction, right? Then there's use, and then there's addiction. Once a person falls into addiction, there is no way to beat it outside of a very guided, well-established protocol that we've seen success. You know, and that requires professional intervention. So initially, outpatient is the first kind of, you know, first prong of attack, where you can get a diagnosis as to what's going on. If you know, my kid crashed a car, or they were, you know, found with marijuana in their room, that doesn't mean they need to go to rehab, right? It's just an indication of something. Let's explore it. Once you can explore it in totality, come up with a comprehensive diagnosis, that will drive the treatment plan. That will drive the next series of interventions. Then obviously there's residential. If there's a higher acute, if there's a life and death situation, if there's a pattern of addiction built, then very often you need that initial stabilization phase. You need inpatient rehab. And Michal touched on it. There's the detox, which is a physiological experience where a person needs to really dry out. The drugs cannot be beat. There's medications that can be given to help a person wean themselves off of drugs in a comfortable setting. Most people prevent themselves from going to treatment because they're afraid of the detox. And, you know, I talk to my nursing staff about this all the time, where there are drugs that will help a patient detox in a comfortable way. We have a medical, you know, knowledge base that can help people in a comfortable way. There's always going to be uncomfortable experiences in it, but we can help them, you know, detox off their dependency. And then there's the rehab component, which is really kind of understanding why this person is running back. What are they struggling with? What is the loneliness or this, this pain that they fell into the addiction. What's going on, which really takes place on the rehabilitation side of things. And the third component, I would say, is aftercare. Aftercare is one of the most underutilized programs available, interventions available. The way I like to compare it is to diabetes, right? So if you have a flare-up, the objective of a diabetic is, once there's a diagnosis made, they need to modulate their blood sugar throughout the continuum of their life. After every meal, they need to prick themselves to see what their sugar levels are at. When they stop doing that, that's when the relapse takes place. That's when they end up going back to the hospital and need, again, stabilization. So for a person to think about their recovery from a long-term perspective, there needs to be a program set up for individuals to continue doing the work. And there are multiple ways. There's Vivitrol, there are medications to help if somebody's significantly addicted to the opiates. And then there's the social component to it. There's the 12-step model that people use. There's family, community. All of these things are in place. There's a structure out there for a person to stay plugged in, to continue doing the work of recovery throughout their lives. And just like somebody with diabetes or hypertension, once a person establishes what their recovery paradigm looks like, they need to continue doing it and can live a super successful life, assuming they're open to continuing doing the work that's been outlined by these professional and established protocols.
Thank you, Mo. So we're talking a lot about treatment and signs, but is there anything, and perhaps you can both address this, is there anything that could be done preventatively? Is there any way to talk to your kids about this? Is there, what could be done before things become an issue?
As you know, as parents, we can talk to our kids all we want, and then as teens, they will do what they want. And for every marijuana on Google, if you look, and for every negative of marijuana, a kid can send you 10 Google information articles why marijuana is good and not harmful.
Yeah.
So talking definitely helps, but looking at your kid and really, really observing. Obviously, when they go to college, it's a lot harder, but in high school, looking at their behavior really is the only one. Talking is wonderful, but if they want to do something, they will do it, because the most important part for teens are their peer groups. Much more of what we as parents can say, it's what they learn or do with their peer groups. I wanted to ask you, Mo, and I had to, this 12-step program. Unfortunately, many Jewish kids or many young kids just don't relate to it. It's about God, it's about Jesus, it's about, and do you know of any other programs that are geared to young people that are not all about religion?
Yes, so there's a program there's a couple of programs that really they're at the core, they're very similar to the structure of a 12-step. The 12-step is a model that's been used and it's widely accepted, obviously, but there's something called smart recovery, peer-to-peer support. Essentially, the way I understand the objective of a 12-step meeting is to facilitate connection. And that can be recreated with younger folks as well, where there are people that can talk to each other, sharing their experiences, going through similar types of issues, where the conversation now has a place to be addressed. So there's a couple of other programs similar to the 12-step model, but if there's a way to recreate this 12-step model in a subdivision where there's not so much talk about God or the structure per se of the 12 steps, that we found has been very helpful. And we'd encourage them to go out with friends in recovery, to do, even if it's not going to a meeting, they're going bowling, or they're playing basketball, or they're gaming with others in recovery. What it does is it creates a certain bonding. But just to talk to your point as far as preventative pieces, for me to sit here and tell you the answer is presumptuous. I think that prayer is a big piece that I would encourage people to do. Obviously, it's part of our faith. But perhaps one other additional piece that can be helpful is for families to model vulnerability, for the adult figure in a child's life to model vulnerability. Come home from work and share, I'm scared, there's volatility in my employment. Again, it's not, there needs to be boundaries and there needs to be security, but to be able to create, almost roll out the red carpet that, hey, if you're struggling, that's part of the human condition. And to create that environment, even subconsciously through osmosis in your home as a child is developing, can be very helpful because the child then can lean on that and that might help. Again, there's the denial and then there's the minimization and there's the deception that all exist. But pre the addiction, in the beginning stages, if a child internalizes that, hey, my dad and mom aren't perfect and there's challenges that require struggle, that require outside help, assistance, that in and of itself creates a safety for a child to be able to explore their own internal issues as things start to escalate.
Thank you, Mo. I think that's good general parenting advice for all issues. Michal, you brought this up, and I think it would be great if you can both address this. You talked about shame and stigma. Definitely something that exists. When you talked in the beginning how our image of the typical drug user is someone, living under a bridge, but that's obviously not the truth, but there is a lot of stigma and shame. Can you talk about stigma and shame and how it affects treatment and people accessing treatment and what can be done about it?
Sure. I mean, I would just start with, shame dies in public. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. Shame dies in public. So the more awareness programs like today, the more conversation that is accepted within our community and our family systems, the less people will hide from this issue. And the very nature of talking about it, putting the issue on the table at the forefront of our conversations to reflect this program back to our families, Friday night or at the Sunday barbecue, continuously talking about it helps minimize the shame. The second piece to that is understanding that, our community has done great work when it comes to cancer treatment. I think that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, if somebody that had cancer, there was a lot of shame and stigma around it. I think through programs and organizations that have gone forward thinking around it, it has really destigmatized it. Addiction is a disease. There's definitely components that, as Michal, as you outlined, was beyond his control. I mean, more than anything else, he wanted to beat it, and there was a disease. He was trapped in his own mind, and there was a physiological dependency. So the more we're just talking about it, the more there's awareness events, the more that we recognize and understand what addiction is about, the easier it will be for people to access appropriate treatments for their loved ones struggling.
Thank you. Michal, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not
Okay.
really. I think
Okay.
what he said is absolutely true.
Okay. Before we get into the questions, and we've covered a lot of very important topics today, I wanted to share with everyone that originally when I had contacted Michal about this program, we had actually planned to do this program before Ari had passed away with Mo, and I called Michal because I suggested perhaps that we do it in his memory. And we had a very long conversation, and by the end of the conversation, Michal and I discussed perhaps her coming on. But one thing that I felt, I wasn't sure about was Ari passed away, what was it, like a little over a month ago? Michal?
Yeah, just a little over.
And I said to Michal, why don't we do this program in a few months? This just happened. It's so raw. It's so recent. Perhaps you want to wait a little bit till allow yourself to grieve a little bit before you do this program. But Michal felt very strongly that we should not push off this program, but we should do it right away. And I'd like you to share with everyone what you said to me, why you felt the need to do this program right now.
because I feel that in a few months, there are going to be so many more people dead. So many. When the DA was sitting here, every 10 minutes, they got called away for another OD, 12-year-old OD. It was so heartbreaking for me that I felt I need to do this right away. And the one thing that maybe add to what Mo said is have your child speak to a recovering addict. If you suspect anything, or even before, Ari was already speaking to BBYO groups, and during his speech, afterwards, kids would come up to him and say, oh my God, you know, I think I may be addicted. I didn't even know. Hearing young people, coming out from young people, I think speaks the most, someone who is recovered and fought so hard to recover. I think Ari helped a lot of young people get help right away and not be ashamed of it. So, well, this is why I'm doing this. And also because during the Shiva, so many families whispered in my ear, we need help. And we're ashamed, we're scared, we don't know where to go. And I think every day counts. For me, you know, if it wasn't Sunday, he would have been here if he was not that desperate to quiet his mind that particular day. And I don't know what triggered at that particular day, but I will be here for anybody. If you suspect anything, if you need, I've learned so much since his death from the DEA and the coronary of what is available in Seminole County, at least. Things I didn't know because things are so expensive and many parents just don't have the ability to pay for this. So that is why.
Thank you, Michal. And just so everyone knows, I put Michal and Mo's contact info in the chat. So if anyone wants to follow up with either of them, they're both happy for you to reach out to them. You know, Michal, you talked about how Ari was very giving and loving, and I can see where he gets it from. That you're carrying on his mission of trying to make the world a better place and trying to help people. You know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I want to give some time to answer a few questions. If anyone still wants to add questions, there's a Q&A tab on the bottom. You can also privately send me a message as well if you don't want to post it publicly. So let's just take a look. Okay. So I got a few questions also privately about marijuana because you know that marijuana is legal in a lot of places. A lot of people talk about the benefits of it. You know, people seem to want to know, you know, how do we talk to our kids about it? Because they're, you know, when your kid comes to you and tells you all the pros of it, how do you talk to them about marijuana? You know, is it really a gateway drug? Is it something that we should be concerned about as parents? I think Mo, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I could jump in here first and then your thoughts. But I mean, I would say, first of all, if your kids is talking to you, even if it comes across aggressive or, you know, you think they're trying to manipulate you, if that conversation comes out of their mouth, that's an invitation. That is an awesome opportunity to take the conversation to the next level. So I would say right there, you have a win, right? As opposed to being fixated on the exact technical response, there's a dialogue there. You just got a window into their world as far as their thinking, as far as what their curiosities are. And I would double down on that because that's an opportunity to really nurture a relationship and conversation around this topic, which is so sensitive and so complex. Regarding whether it's a drug, addictive qualities or not, I would just take a step back and respond in this way, that addiction is never about the substance. It's really about the relationship with that substance. So opiate, as an example, right, is not toxic if it's used post-surgery, right? It can be a very helpful, beneficial tool to help a person heal. But if somebody runs to opiates to escape, to numb, to quiet their brain, then it becomes an issue. So it's really about our relationship with the drug. If we're using it for an escape, that's an indicator of something deeper going on. If it's experimentational or something else, then it's less of a concern.
Thank you. Someone just, this is probably very hard.
I'd like just to add to that some kids can do marijuana, no problem. No problem. I have one son that did it and nothing happened, and one son that could never, because it threw him into depression and anxiety. So also watch how your child reacts when they do take marijuana, because I'd say 90% of kids will experiment with marijuana, but it's that one kid that then becomes either dependent on it and wants to smoke it all the time, or if you see that because of marijuana, your kid has more anxiety, more depression, and it's not doing what marijuana is supposed to do. Again, red lights, it's all about red lights, but I agree with everything Mo said.
Okay, another question was, I guess this is something for Mo, are there any data, statistics, info about addiction in the Jewish community?
Yes, yeah, there is tons of data. We have, there are organizations out there, referents, so to speak, to our rehab that deal on the front lines of crisis intervention and in management of those cases. We have that data. The data is really differentiated between sub communities, if you will, age demographics. So I could talk to that, or if somebody wants to reach out, I could tell you that we're definitely seeing an increase in the college age years. There's definitely a strong correlation between what takes place on an experimentation level and then a dependency level. So those are kind of some highlight. I mean, I could throw numbers at you, but if somebody's really interested, if they're susceptible to falling into a certain kind of subcategory, they can just shoot me an email, call my cell, and I could talk more directly to their concern.
Thank you. This is probably a very challenging question to answer, but someone wrote, any advice for brokenhearted parents and how they can move forward?
Yeah, I mean, Michal, I would defer to you on that one. I know, we have some family groups and there's Al-Anon meetings, but I mean, I'll defer that one. I know that, again, I'm kind of like the middleman, and there are sub-organizations popping up that could connect people. It's such a healthy process to be able to talk about it and share experiences and strength and hope. So, there are avenues. Whoever asked that question, you didn't do your job yet. Follow up. That's your job, to continue following up, not just to throw it out there in the wind. Call Michal after this program, call myself, and take it to the next level, because obviously it's confidential, it's such a key component to this. We want to protect everyone's privacy, but there are resources available to you.
Okay. Another question.
This was a friend of mine, and I want to just answer all my friends, because everybody, this community has been unbelievable, and all my friends and even strangers that I don't know. I think it's just the process. Everything reminds you of your child. I opened the freezer and I saw food he bought that he wanted to cook for our family, and I lost it. So it's little moments that you fall apart and you think you can't breathe anymore and that you can't live on. But then you have to recenter yourself, and actually I go into denial. I go straight into denial right now in order to function. And right now I'm not answering a lot of phone calls. I'm trying to concentrate to help my children with their grieving, and all the energy that I have every day is to help my grandson to make a cup of coffee. So just I know it'll take time, but I think for me, just individually for me, is to help other people. And here in Seminole County, there is a group for grieving moms, and we're going to try and change some things, like getting Vivitrol into rehabs for free, like just make, more education out there, helping the DEA to catch more people because their job is almost impossible. So little things like that, if we can, that's what's going to help me eventually. I'm not there yet, but eventually. And thank you, Margie.
Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions, but for those of you who I don't get to your questions, please feel free to reach out afterwards. All these questions are really important. Another question that came up is, when it comes back to the marijuana question, seems like to be a big question. How do you make sure, a lot of kids are going to be using marijuana, how do we make sure that it's not laced with something dangerous like fentanyl?
There's no way. There's no way. I mean, there's no way, period. If you're making a decision to allow your child to smoke marijuana, I would say grow it yourself, but I can't recommend that because it's illegal at this point. So there is no way. It's the truth. It's scary. It's dangerous, and you are playing with a life and death situation. Again, it's not about shocking the system or really trying to scare anyone, but the reality is that there's, street drugs are contaminated.
Mo, what about where you can buy legal marijuana? Those wouldn't be laced, right?
So there's a lot of research being done now. There isn't an FDA approval process yet. It's an own internal organization. I work with a medical director that prescribes marijuana. It's THC, and there's variations. If there's a chronic pain issue and you're working with a doctor, and you're getting from your medical marijuana card, you're going to a dispensary that's licensed, that's established, then I would say that's a better bet. But you have to ensure that this individual is only getting from them after the consultation from a medical, from a medical provider. So, to your point, yes, there are healthy ways of utilizing marijuana. If that's where the question was coming from, then yes, I would say that that's the appropriate way. But outside of that very small, tight run system, it's a very scary reality out there.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
We'll do one last question. Michal had touched upon how 12-step is like a very Christian sort of program. Mo, you run a Jewish rehab. One of your programs is a Jewish focused rehab. Where does the Judaism come in the recovery process?
Yeah, that's a powerful question. It's interesting. Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, obviously, and the rabbis bring down a law that if a person lights the candle in a safe place and without any wind, and a couple of moments later the candle extinguishes, the law is that they already accomplished their goal and they already fulfilled their obligation, so to speak, to light the menorah. So just leaning on that messaging for a minute, I think that it's our jobs to do the best we can, and there's a certain understanding that something beyond us runs the world. In terms of recovery, the 12-step is based off of Christianity, which is based off of Judaism, and there's a lot of interplay. Very often there's a lot of religious trauma that falls into a person's storyline. We talk a lot about something more powerful than the individual in our Jewish rehab. God of our understanding. It's not about dictating, to the individual who God is, what that's about, but it's really, addicts tend to, they're so desperate to be in control that they tend to fall away from the thinking that something beyond them can resolve the issue. And that's a very central theme in recovery. where we, the first 3 steps is really about deferring to a higher power. The serenity prayer is a beautiful prayer. Maybe we should close with the serenity prayer, where we're asking God, or as we understand him, to grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, right? So there's a lot of interplay between religion and the 12-step model, but it's really about understanding that there's something beyond us that can help us carry us through this challenge. All the textbooks in the world don't have the answers. I'll tell you that straight to the point, right? Sometimes we don't know why things happen. And Michal, you could shout this to the world because you're a phenomenal person with a very strong, healthy family system. And Ari fell into it. And you're struggling because of that. And there's no reason, there's no clear-cut, evidence-based solution to why this happened. I'm definitely not going to be the one saying it. So that's the best way I can respond even to that question.
Thank you, Mo. It sounds like you're doing amazing work.
It's the courage of the individual struggling. That's really what it is.
Okay, well, thank you, Michal and Mo. You two were incredible. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. I think
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
so incredibly proud of what you're doing right now. I want to just let everyone know that this program is going to be aired on the Spark Orlando Facebook page tonight. Feel free to share it. I think awareness is super important, and that's what today was all about. I want to wish you all a very happy Hanukkah. May we see a lot of light in our life, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.